Okay, so we're just going to wait for a few minutes as people enter the room, and then we'll make a start. So do bear with us. The room is starting to fill up nicely. Please all feel free to start introducing yourselves in the chat box and say hi and who you are and where you're from. That's always nice as an icebreaker. Okay, we're just going to wait another minute and then we'll make a start and crack on. Okay, so I'm just going to get a little bit of housekeeping out the way. You can see that there's some closed captions below, and everybody can turn those off if they're a distraction. So you can just click on the CC live transcript button and hide those if you don't want them to be there. Just as a rule of thumb for today, the first half of the session is going to be obviously a Q&A with our panelists. But what we would like you to do is to pose any questions yourselves to the panel, which we're going to be addressing in the second half of the session. Rather than putting those in the chat box, we'd like you to put your questions in the Q&A box next to them, and we can address those as we go. But we're hoping as we go through the session, some of your questions may get answered, but do feel free to pose your questions there. I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Glenn Manners. I'm an Associate Director here at Charity People. As everybody knows, EDI has been absolutely central to the themes as we've gone through the last couple of years. A main part of that has been diversifying boards, and we know there's been loads of content out there that's helping charities to address those problems on the boards to make them more diverse. We wanted to present today with regards to lived experience, which is actually quite new to so many people. And the conversation isn't just going to be to promote why it's important, but actually have some more challenging conversations about how this isn't just a box ticking exercise. It's not just about a bum on a seat and done and dusted, problem solved. It's actually really a lot more complex than that. And the panel will be hopefully helping you navigate some of those complexities today. I'd like to start by passing you round the room to allow our panels to introduce themselves. Joni, do you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Glenn. So my name is Joni Emery. I'm the Governance and Executive Manager at Clinks. I've been with Clinks for about 10 months. Very much enjoy working for Clinks. They are an amazing organisation, and my job predominantly focuses on governance, support to our executive and our board of trustees, and a large part of my role is recruitment too.
Thanks very much, Joni, and welcome.
Thank you.
Sana, over to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Sana. I'm a Beyond Suffrage trainee graduate, and I've recently taken up an appointment at Refugee Cafe, which is an amazing small charity based in Lewisham. I've been a trustee for just 4 months now.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for taking part today. Leanne, over to you.
Hi there, I'm Leanne Jeffrey. I'm a recent Beyond Suffrage programme graduate, and I'm in the process of applying for trustee positions.
Thanks so much, Leanne. And Precious, you're going to host today's event and pose some questions to the panel. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about you and the work that you do?
Thanks, Glenn. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the session. I'm Precious Atoli. I'm the founder CEO of Social Practice ENT. We are a not-for-profit accounting and consultancy social enterprise. And I will be sharing shortly about the work we've done around lived experience and hopefully setting the scene for the conversation.
Fantastic. Okay. So, Precious, should we start with the Q&As?
We certainly could. Do we have quite a few questions in the chat?
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean that. I meant the questions
Oh, right.
to the panel. Apologies.
Oh, yes. I was quite surprised. I was starting with questions.
Sorry.
Thanks, Glenn. No, that's fine. So I can start by outlining what lived experience is.
Yeah.
So just with regards to lived experience, as you mentioned, Glenn, it's still a fairly new discipline, especially when it comes to lived experience trusteeship. There's been some good qualitative research that's been carried out more recently. The main one being work carried out by Belgique Sandu into the value of lived experience. So she defined lived experience as the experiences of people on whom a social issue or combination of issues has a direct impact. And then experts of experience being social change makers who seek to use their lived experience to inform the work of social purpose organizations to drive and lead social change and to drive their social impact work. So hopefully we've got a bit of a foundation of what lived experience leadership is. So in terms of the work that we've done, it started with Beyond Suffrage in 2018. We started researching inclusion from a gender and racial diversity perspective, trying to understand what the current trends are. We worked with a range of organizations, the Young Trustees movement, getting on board, Action for Trustee Racial Diversity, and started to get a better understanding of what racial diversity is looking like at the moment in the sector. And then eventually, after running that program, we were commissioned by Women in Prison to run a lived experience trustee training program to support women with convictions onto boards, replicating the Beyond Suffrage program. So hopefully we can have a conversation about what does lived experience look like? What does it mean? Lived experience is not a science. There's some good, interesting research that's emerging from this, and that it's immersive, it's participatory. So hopefully that will set a good scene and a foundation for the questions. So I'm going to start with you, Joni. Could you just share a bit more about how you integrated lived experience? Because we had a conversation and you carried out the Clinks trustee recruitment process, and it was informed by lived experience. Could you just share a bit more about how you managed to integrate lived experience to the recruitment process?
I'd love to. Thank you, Precious. So it's back in the spring. As I mentioned earlier, for Clinks, I am in charge of recruitment and looking after our board of trustees. And we had a couple of spaces come up. So I knew we had to start a recruitment project for some new trustees. We're very lucky. We have a fantastic, engaging and diverse board already. And we have had lived experience on our board for some time. But it's come to that point where we had some gaps. So our chairperson, she's very, very passionate about wanting us to be an inclusive organisation at every level, and we're all on board with this plan. So it started off with a conversation about what we want to represent our board, and for that board to be representative of Clinks, etc. So we started off with a full skills audit. That skills audit involved all of our current board and worked out what our gaps were in our skills and experience. And we came to the conclusion that we were heavily underrepresented in the area of persons with lived experience, persons from racially minoritized backgrounds, and that youthful contingent, so the under 30s. We could do with that element, those innovative ideas being brought to our board. We are a member organisation. We've got 658, I think it is, members. So there is that responsibility to lead from the front. That said, so we put together a recruitment pack, and a lot of thought went into this. So how were we going to target those areas that we specifically needed, and how were we going to make it accessible? So we worked out that it would be a better approach to have a very casual element to the application process. So we put together our pack and we actively encouraged everybody to apply that felt they met that criteria and could bring skills and experience. We actively encouraged persons from racially minoritized backgrounds, persons with lived experience, and the under 30s to apply. At that point, we weren't sure of the scale of where we were going. We were simply going to recruit for 2 spaces. But because that application pack went out and the quality of our applications was so high, we were very, very happy with how we had managed to target. So we actively encouraged applications through various platforms. We had videos, we had expressions of interest, we had CVs, whatever people felt comfortable with. So again, we tried to make it inclusive from a neurodiversity point of view too. So we're trying to do all these things at the same time, and it did take its time. So over the summer, we had another roundtable with our chair, and because we'd managed to target the younger generation, we decided that actually we were going to take on 5 trustees and use up all of our spaces for elected and co-opted. And we also wanted to make space for 2 board fellows. So we were going to roll out the all new, all singing, dancing Clinks board fellowship program. And I actively had discussions with the applicants. So we kept it very formal. There was not so much a formal interview as informal conversations. So getting to know people. We didn't ask anybody to disclose. Obviously with trustees, there comes that point where if they accept an offer, then we have to discuss the waivers and the legality side, but we would support and cross that bridge at that point if they needed a waiver. So at no point did we ask questions about lived experience. I'm very aware that many of our candidates did have it because they just openly disclosed. It became part of their reason for applying to join Clinks to work within the criminal justice sector. It's the driving force for their passion in many ways. But it comes down to the individuals, and we needed a variety of individuals to come on our board so we can strive to be a lead by example organisation and make an inclusive environment where we remove unconscious bias and prejudice at every level. So from the board all the way through our organisation. So that was the plan, and I'm very happy to say we've just made 7 offers. Can't say any more than that because I'm waiting for yeses and consents, but it's been an interesting journey. I'm very happy with how it's gone. I think with anything, there's always things you could do better, but I'm really excited to see where this board is going to go, and all that authenticity, experience, background, knowledge is going to really shape the future for us.
That is fantastic, Joni. And 2 things that instantly come to mind. The first one is reducing the barriers. So the fact that you allowed everyone to apply, regardless of whether they've got convictions. As a criminal justice charity, it just makes sense, doesn't it? So that's fantastic. That's really interesting to hear. And then also the uncertainty that comes with the work. So you set out to recruit 2. Did you say, was it 2? And you ended up with 7?
Yeah, we started off with 2. But when you do your maths, and we've got an AGM in November, and we do have a trustee stepping down. So with our 8 elected spots and our 4 co-opted, we figured we've got such a high quality of applications, we'd be silly to let some of these people go. So we may as well offer the maximum we can. And then that brought up the idea of the board fellowship program. So to give it's specifically targeted for the under 30s, to give younger people a chance to have that experience. So they won't have the legal voting rights, but they can come along, be involved, give opinions, help shape us going forward, and see what being on a board is all about.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Joni. Sana, do you want to come in? Is there anything that you could add from your perspective, having recently joined the board? So from the participant perspective.
Sure, thanks, Precious. So after the Beyond Suffrage programme, I started to actively look for trustee roles. Refugee Cafe was actually the 3rd one that I applied to, and I really liked it because they didn't ask for a CV, so I didn't have to say I had X amount of years of experience, and they didn't ask like what senior management experience I had. Instead, they asked me 3 short questions. So why I want to be a trustee, what skills and experience I can bring to the role, and then knowledge about issues affecting refugees and my passion for initiatives in the local community. So I really like that. And when it came to the interview, it wasn't really an interview, it was more of an informal chat, as Joni also mentioned. So I prefer that a lot more, it made me more comfortable. I had quite a few chats over video because we're still in a pandemic. It gave me the opportunity to kind of ask all the questions I had and to hear from the chair. And she was like really enthusiastic, listened to everything that I was saying as well. Another thing was that she invited me to shadow the board meeting, the upcoming board meeting. That's something that I was going to ask anyway, because it's what I learned about in the Beyond Suffrage programme, but I really like that she proactively offered that. And then the final thing, I was offered a one-to-one with the trustee that was leaving as well. So that was just an added benefit to get a more in-depth detail about the role.
That's fantastic. And it's quite interesting hearing your experience from inclusion being built into the recruitment process. Was there anything in particular that stood out? I know you mentioned that the application process was simplified. The interview was more conversational. Was there anything else that you thought was really helpful to help you secure that position or build your confidence?
Yeah, I guess the main one was like how the application was kind of presented, and then when I was interviewing, it was like it's a very small charity. Like we founded it in 2019, so it hasn't grown that much. So that community vibe that I also liked, that everyone was friendly and offering like informal chats, which was quite nice.
Fantastic. Thanks, Anna. Leanne, I'm going to ask you to come in. What are your thoughts on conversations around lived experience and trauma-informed inclusion? Do you have any thoughts on how we can ensure that conversations that we have are not triggering, they're not re-traumatizing, but they actually support people in a way that's meaningful?
Yeah, I think, depending on what charity people are applying for, or what kind of lived experience they have, we have to remember that triggering someone, whether it's talking about something, everybody reacts differently. So how I always work is there's 5 guiding principles when it comes to doing a trauma-informed care process. So that's safety, choice, collaboration, trustworthiness, and empowerment. I would also add to that, from a trustee point of view, accessibility. That's so vital for something like this. I think, it starts from the very beginning, from the recruitment. It's the language that we use, how we use it, how we're trying to get these people in to come and do this. And then during the interview, and it's our language and our tone and our body language, it's all of that. And it's giving them the space at the beginning to, like you said, people just give that story because they're passionate about it. Give them the space to be there, and not, oh, we're having you here because you have this. What else do you have to offer? And giving us that space, that's so vital when it comes to having lived experience. And some things, unfortunately, are really triggering. If you're talking about the people that have been abused or domestic violence or things like that, I've had to talk on a panel about that recently. It is really hard, but it's just, I thought of you, would you like this opportunity to, have a look at that? It is difficult to find the right guide, but I think if we follow the principles of it that we talk, so when we talk about safety, that's ensuring, obviously the physical safety, but it's also the emotional safety. So it's given that space. And for some people, that's without judgment or without questions. And people that have gone through severe trauma will notice everything. So it's trying to manage your process of having this compassionate looking face, but without a judging face or a, oh my gosh, I feel sorry for your face. But I think for me, with the process, it starts with the language that we're all using. We have to remember that this is a collaboration, that we are experts by experience, and it's just as valuable as the other people on the board with all these credentials that they do have. And I think for me, I would like to see in recruitment packs especially is we help shape the services because of what we've been through. There's nothing worse for someone like me to look at a board of trustees on a website and see that there's no lived experience at all. It's like, how are you making these decisions, especially within, for me, the criminal justice system, or within mental health, or within childhood trauma? You know, how are you making decisions when you've never been there or done that? And I think it's so important. I'm just going to say this about the recruitment thing in there, where they will say we're specifically looking for someone with experience in legal or law, or someone with marketing, something, and we are always looking for people with lived experience. And I just think that's a really important thing. So I think sticking with the 5 principles, 6 if you add that accessibility on there, and ensure that from the very beginning they're treated with respect and they're empowered from the very beginning, you know, and we just build trust. We know it's a process. When someone with lived experience joins a board, it is a process. It takes time and commitment on both sides, you know, and that's what we have to do. But if we work with that principles, I think that we'd go a long way.
That's fantastic. And that's a really useful framework. So thank you for that. I hope everyone else will find it really useful, because we often talk about recruitment and not enough thought goes into the retention piece. So that's a really interesting and helpful perspective. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so Joni, do you have anything that you would like to add on trauma and that trauma-informed approach?
Just off the back of what Leanne said about having that authenticity at the top. So our board shape our organisation. If they are representative of everything we stand for, then we're off to a good start. And running through our organisation, we have a lived experience from director level to officer level, and we want to set that example for our members and wider and beyond, that there is hope. If you are a person with lived experience and you're being told you're never going to work again, that's it for you, you've got all these barriers to face, you know, the most you can hope for is just, you know, a smaller job with a lesser income, then this is hopeful for everybody, that there is second chances, there is a way forward. If you want to be there, you can get there.
That is powerful. Thanks so much, Joni. And I agree completely. We need to integrate lived experience, not just a few token people, but operationally and at governance level as well, because then it stops being about lived experience. It just becomes sharing power in a meaningful way. Okay, thanks so much, Joni. Sana, do you have any thoughts on how we could create a culture which not only attracts, but also retains trustees with lived experience?
Thanks, Precious. Yeah, I think, like you said, recruitment is the first step, but without a supportive team, like I would feel alone. So as you said, it's not about the one token hire or getting one person to speak out for everyone else. Like over the next 10 years, not just the next year, you want to keep that representation as people come and go on the board. For me, it was like, in terms of the supportive atmosphere, just welcoming, friendly, like I said, outside of board meetings, having those one-to-ones, the coffees, the virtual coffees. At the beginning, when you're recruiting someone, asking about name pronunciation and pronouns, that's always helpful. And for me, like as a young woman of color, like growing up, you don't perhaps always feel appreciated or valued or recognized. So you've obviously been recruited for a reason, whatever that is, whatever expertise you're bringing. So when people actually say, "Oh, I appreciate that," I find that really valuable. Yeah, because we can't all read minds, and it's nice to communicate. And then another thing, as a young woman of color, I guess, growing up, I always want to like prove myself, and want to do like a million and one things all at once. So I think it's also about creating that culture of like, you don't have to do everything right away. There's time, there's space to grow on this board. And then actually implementing ideas, listening with an open mind. So for me, like one example that comes to mind, when I first joined Refugee Cafe, I was a bit uncomfortable about the wording on like the website. For example, things that sounded like a 1990s Oxfam ad, like war-torn countries, as if like we weren't the ones that invaded them in the first place, and things like refugees have like language barriers. I thought, well, we need to be specific. They have like English language barriers perhaps, but more than the average Brit, like refugees probably have way more like language skills. So it's just things like that about language. And I've only recently said it, and as a result, we're doing a whole like revamp of comms and the website and things, but perhaps creating that culture of like, you know what, straight away it's okay to say these kind of things. No one's going to judge you, like you have that. That's what you're there to do. One of the things you're there to do. And I guess just being aware of your own like power dynamic. Just because you haven't experienced something doesn't mean that you would like kind of gaslight experiences and the reality of others. For I guess coming from a small charity, I would say be honest about time commitments. Don't add bureaucracy where there doesn't need to be. Send board papers in advance. And I mean, if the person offers it, it's a good idea to get a feel for their day-to-day life. Like not everyone's retired on the board, like people have long hours, caring responsibilities perhaps. So seeing how you can all work around each other. And then like the more formal kind of things, I guess, like mentorship, buddy schemes, reverse mentoring, training packs, inductions, handover notes, getting regular anonymous feedback from everyone, the board, volunteers, beneficiaries. And then finally, I would say, yeah, just treat everyone as an equal. Don't patronize people just because they're young or like haven't grown up debating at Oxbridge, like that their ideas are still valid. And I think someone mentioned it before as well, but don't just put people in a box like, oh, you're D&I, you're admin. Ask them about their dreams and give them the freedom to lead on strategic aims for the charity.
That's fantastic. So many things there, so many lists. That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Sana. One thing that stays with me is the professionalization. So sometimes the over-professionalization of spaces can exclude people. So that's some really interesting information, and again, food for thought for everyone. Leanne, is there anything that you would like to add to that?
I think she covered pretty much anything or everything. I think the only thing I would say is that collaboration's building trust with each other and ensuring that involvement the whole way through. There's nothing like building trust than giving someone with lived experience some responsibility and being like, right, we trust you enough to do this, and not made to feel that we're just there as a box ticking exercise, really. But yeah, I think that's what she said. Everything there is really tick, 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 tick. So if you didn't hear her, make sure you play this thing again and listen to her tick, tick, tick. So yeah.
We will have the list circulated, definitely. That's a really good checklist. Okay, so I will wrap up the panel and then I will sum up. Do you have one call to action? So I will start with you, Joni. What's your one call to action if you were to speak to charities that think about recruiting trustees with lived experience?
I would say let's remove the labels. Let people who have that genuine lived experience guide a better created system so we can inspire others to make inclusion our everyday reality.
Fantastic. Thanks, Joni. Leanne?
I would say empowerment and accessibility. People want the opportunity to make changes, and as a lived experience in whatever area you feel hopeless, so to empower them to make changes but better for the next people, I think that's really vital. So that would be my accessibility and empowerment.
Thanks, Leanne. Sana?
I would say don't just think about training the incoming trustee, but like train the current board as well. So things like microaggressions, imposter syndrome, history beyond European Enlightenment and World War II. Like, I think all of those things are really valuable both ways.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Sana. So just to sum up, thank you so much to the panelists. Lots of useful information, all from your personal perspectives. I hope it will inspire the audience to think about lived experience trusteeship, but think about how to create spaces where people can come in, feel included, feel as if they can belong, feel as if they can thrive, because ultimately it's not just about recruitment, it's about retention as well. So I am going to hand over to you, Glenn. Do we have any questions coming through the Q&A?
We do, yeah. Unsurprisingly, a lot of them are for you, Joni. Having been there and done that from the recruitment point of view, I think we've got a room full of recruiters who have got a few questions for you. So we'll start with them. Siobhan was keen to know how you went about your targeting.
Okay, so we've got a prominent place on social media. Our comms department are pretty hot on all of that, and we had discussions with our new Race and Justice network that's up and coming. So it was about targeting our members. So we have, I think I said earlier, 658 members. They all receive our light lunch newsletter and our news flashes. So it was communicating that. We did pick up Beyond Suffrage. We're running a programme at the same time, which is how we ended up speaking to Precious. So that was like a light bulb moment. So it was being aware and, how would you say, word of mouth, people passing on. So we have a lady in post as our Race and Justice coordinator. And our CEO is currently manoeuvring through our attempts to be an anti-racist organisation at the same time. So we were linking up our contacts and asking people to spread the word. So amongst the, we've got some university background colleagues. So it was about inspiring the youth element as well. So there were lots of different elements to the targeting. But basically it was spread the word and say what we're encouraging people to do.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Joni. Another one for you. I don't know if this is an option or not, so sorry to put you on the spot, but Zoe's asked if you're able to share your recruitment pack.
Absolutely, we can. Yeah, no problem at all.
Okay, so what we're going to be doing for everybody is sharing this live video tomorrow, and we'll do our best to see if we can include that pack. And if not, we will be able to email it on to people. So yeah, great news. Thanks very much for sharing, Joni. Amberine, hi Amberine, good to see you here. She has asked if you can say more about your board fellowship program. It wasn't something that I'd heard of, and Amberine's asking how long that process took.
Okay, so as I said, it didn't start off with that sort of element in mind, but as things progressed, what I should say running alongside that is that we opened up an apprenticeship for a person specifically to give somebody a chance who has lived experience and from a racially minoritized background. So the apprenticeship was reserved for that specific candidate. And alongside that, finding our training provider and having that communication and having discussions about work experience, this led to the whole idea, if we're targeting a youthful element to our board, that we bring the whole thing together and we offer 2 placements. So the conversations around that started end of June, and we have just offered 2 placements now. So there were candidates that could have been trustees, but have ended up having a trustee board fellow placement because we don't want to lose them. They are too good not to have. So it came about as a result of involvements.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Joni. Interesting question from Hayley. Do you offer incentives to your trustees for participation?
No, I'd say the incentive is to help us pave a new way forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a trustee away day coming up, so we can get to know our trustees in person. They can get to know each other. It's non-remuneration role, so it's about being part of a movement.
Yeah. I've got just a quick question for Sana and Leanne, just to break this up a little bit. what advice would you, if somebody was wanting to become a trustee, I'm keen to hear from you about what you'd be telling them have been the main benefits to you and your development and your growth.
I would, depending on what lived experience they offered, if they were coming from a criminal justice system, everybody has to do the Beyond Suffrage program. I mean, it was so enlightening and so educational for us, and it gave the girls such confidence to be able to look for roles. It gave me the confidence to approach a charity and be like, look, this is what you do. You don't have any lived experience. Why? Yeah. And now they're recruiting for a lived experience, and they send me an email saying, are you going to make sure you reply, kind of thing. And I will, but you know, it's them kind of things, but it does give you the knowledge. Some people want to be involved, like you said, it is a call and you want to make the change, but you don't really understand what's really involved in trusteeship. Precious goes through all of it, all the financial stuff, all of the legal stuff, and some of it is really like difficult to take in, but that knowledge gives you that confidence, so you're not going in as just a lived experience, just someone to add to the table. And I think so a program like that, and I would encourage other charities to do something similar with their backgrounds, you know, with their lived experience backgrounds. I think that's really vital.
Fantastic. That's really helpful, Leanne. Sana, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I guess that for me, I didn't know what a trustee was like a year ago at all. I just randomly came across the Beyond Suffrage program. I've always liked volunteering for charities, but I never really knew how they were run. So actually having all of that experience on board has been invaluable, especially being able to get involved on the more like management, strategic goals, finance. You don't just think that, oh, I wish we could do that event. You can actually like do that event. You can allocate funds, and it's like so much more responsibility. And I think it's given me confidence and more of able to look at the bigger picture, like in my day job as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That's really, really helpful. I think it's great for the audience as well to know the benefits, and that will help them with their messaging. So that's great. Hi, Malcolm. Malcolm has asked, out of the 7, Joni, how many were from Black and Asian backgrounds, and how many from those backgrounds applied? I don't know if you have those sort of stats.
We kept them separate, so we had an equalities monitoring form with our recruitment pack that people could fill in if they wanted to, and we had those sent to a separate email address in HR. So the statistics were able to be looked at separately to the applicants, but I do know now that provided it all goes well and people accept and everything's fine, I'd say 5 of the 7 are from racially minoritized backgrounds.
Sure, that's really helpful. Thanks, Joni. Paul asks an interesting question. Could you advise on how to best recognise and value lived experience whilst not defining people by and limiting them to their lived experience? Precious, I don't know if you want to tackle that one, because it is complex.
It is, it really is. And we've had quite a few conversations about this with you as well, Glenn. It's one of those issues whereby you have to find the right balance. So on one hand, you want to ensure that you're recruiting people with lived experience. But on the other hand, you want to ensure that you're acknowledging everything else that people have and everything else that will contribute to the conversation. So 2 pieces of information that I find really helpful. I think I mentioned them briefly. Baljit Singh's research. If you haven't read it, please do read it. And then Lucy Calder-Doctor as well. She carried out research into lived experience trusteeship. Just being able to acknowledge things like power dynamics, being able to acknowledge the fact that, I touched on this already, the over-professionalization of spaces. So for some lived experiences, people will never have been in a professional environment. So you're almost putting them off right from the outset. So how do we build these spaces that are inclusive, that bring people in, but then at the same time, supporting them to be able to use any other skills that they have? So it's just trying to find that balance between building inclusion, making it accessible, breaking down barriers, but then at the same time, not being fixated on lived experience to the point whereby someone becomes the voice of the community. So no one can ever speak for an entire group of individuals. No one should ever be the voice of the community. Always ask people how they want to be addressed. Always ask people if they're okay. Make sure you're not re-traumatizing anyone. But yes, just trying to find that balance and acknowledging the fact that it will never start off perfect. It's a process. So it's building that inclusion. NPC I think they've got a paper, I had a look at it yesterday, can't find it, whereby they were looking at the 4 different levels of lived experience. And the first one was building a welcoming environment, I believe. So welcoming people in, and then just kind of going through all 4 levels and acknowledging that the first attempt will not be the perfect attempt. It's this process of building inclusion over a period of time. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. Thanks so much, Precious. Okay, next we've got a question from the leader. She asks, how do you reciprocate? What do people get in return for this very skilled and dedicated role?
Glenn, can I take this answer?
Absolutely.
Somebody asked me this a couple of weeks ago. What are you getting out of it? Why are you doing this? And I said, I don't do it for cash change. I do it for critical change.
That's
and
great.
As simple as that. When you come from a lived experience point of view and you're applying to be a trustee, you're doing it because you want to see change. So no cash change, just critical change. We get the same as everybody else. Transport's normally paid for and stuff like that, but we're doing this because we want to see critical change. So that's the answer, I think. Yeah.
Very succinctly put. Does anybody else have anything to add to that, Sana?
Yeah, I think Leanne's covered it. Like, you want to see change. For me as well, it's also about like you're passionate about that charity's mission, their vision. Like, I wasn't randomly applying to a million trustee roles. I was specifically looking for the things that really motivated me and that I wanted to be involved in.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks so much, both of you. We are coming to the last question, and we're here till 1 if you need us to be. We've got no problem winding down early if that's the case, but just to let everybody know, if any of you do have any more questions, now is the great time to pose them. Okay, so Camille says, thank you so much, super interesting, and really love the fellowship program. When seeking to have lived experience on a board for specific reasons, how were evaluations of candidate profiles made? Joni, I'm guessing that's probably a good one for you.
And so this is about raising the question of lived experience with candidates, did you say?
Yes. Yeah, I'm guessing, yeah, it would be in that case.
So what we say in our recruitment pack is that, we absolutely welcome lived experience to our board, but at no point do we ask any question about it. So we allow those applications to come in any way, shape or form that they feel comfortable. As we found during the process, some people did want to disclose as part of their reasoning for applying for the role, because we are a criminal justice charity. When it comes to the point where we're offering the roles to our trustees, then we have to legally comply with elements to do with registering with the Charity Commission when the subject of waivers comes up. But again, we don't need to raise those conversations with people. We let them know you're in a safe space. We want to create an inclusive environment where you're comfortable. And if individuals feel comfortable talking about their story, they can do. But in terms of the waiver side, they apply, they have to do that themselves, but we will 100% support them. And by communicating, by staying in touch, you end up building that rapport. And we found people do just generally get to know you and just chit chat. They get to say bits and pieces about their background. But at no point do we actively ask that question. We don't do it for our staff. We wouldn't do it for the board if it wasn't for the waiver. So it's down to the individual and their level of where they've got to with a conviction. It could be that some people, it's years ago, it's in the background, they might have found it a stumbling block before, but they don't need to bring it to their present. Other people, it's very much a part of who they are now and why they're here. So it's on a case-by-case basis.
Fantastic. Thanks, Joni. Paul has raised an interesting point, and I can imagine boards up and down the country having similar conversations. So thanks for just being so open and raising this. He shared that their trustees had a discussion about the term lived experience being a negative term and wanted to use a different one without actually having an alternative suggestion. And Paul really just wants to know, I guess, from Sana and Leanne, but the others can add, if you guys object to the term as it being a negative. Yeah, what any thoughts?
Hi, Paul. I'm just reading your questions here. So I'm smiling because your last point is it wasn't raised by people with lived experience. And so I think the thing is the terminology. Like I said at the very beginning, it's how you approach that. It's the wording that we use. So when you say lived experience in a negative way, or feel it's a negative, if it's around things like we can shape, we understand that people with lived experience help shape services. We know that they're experts by experience, that we can work together and build trust with our community. And, all of that, there's nothing negative around lived experience. I'm not ashamed of my lived experience. And I think if people have an issue with the word lived experience, I think it's probably because they don't really understand it enough.
Yeah. And
that's not, I don't mean to be harsh, it's just that they don't understand what it means. So it's about the wording you use around it. Oh, she's only here because she's got lived experience. That's an issue. She's an expert. What do we need to do? That's the kind of thing. I've never known people to object to it. But yes, the issue wasn't raised by people with lived experience. That was what made me smile. So yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like context is everything there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks so much, Leanne. And
can I just add to that, Glenn? Is that
okay? Yeah.
So one of the things that instantly comes to mind is language matters. So language is really powerful because it helps us to understand and contextualize things. So lived experience, by using that term, everyone knows what lived experience is. But exactly like Leanne said, it's the way that you then treat and approach people with lived experience. So you could change the name and still treat people without equity. So you're not treating people equitably. You're not building inclusion in any way. People don't feel like they belong. The most important thing is being able to change the environment, the word, language. Yeah, that matters. Lived experience, I think, is a really good term, and we're starting to get to grips with it. However, if people with lived experience don't feel comfortable with the word, that's when that might be another conversation to think about.
Thanks, Precious. Sana, did you have anything to finish up on that?
I think Precious and Leanne have covered it. It's about context. And again, I would say just ask people with lived experience, just have that conversation, instead of making assumptions.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely valid. Okay, I think we are coming to the end of the session. Any last questions? Do let us know. I should flag, I think Tiku is in the chat. She leads on our trustee recruitment. So if anyone needed assistance, then please do reach out to Tiku. You can find her on our website and on LinkedIn, but she'd love to have a chat with you. And that also brings me to want to just share and kind of introduce Hanan to everybody. Hanan Kasami is our head of EDI. And we're so proud to have appointed somebody like Hanan. I'm sure not many of our competitors have gone that far down the line, but she's supporting us in all sorts of ways on EDI and supporting us with our committee, and both internally for charity people and with our clients externally as well. So she's in the chat as well. Do feel free to link with her. As far as what we're going to do tomorrow, we're going to get this video to everybody. Precious, will we be able to put the links to those 2 resources that you mentioned?
We certainly will. Yeah.
Fantastic. And Joni, if we can try and include that pack for everyone, that would be really, really great. Just brings me to thank the panel. I'm so proud to sort of be providing the platform, but you guys were the stars, and I just really, really appreciate you taking the time. It's been so informative to have every angle from this. Pressures both from you and your program, Joni, from having actually done the recruitment, and Sana and Leanne, you know, your experience having been through the journey or going through it. It's really, really been informative to have all of those angles. So I just wanted to thank you so much. And thanks to everybody in the chat for attending. Really, really appreciate you being here. If you have any ideas at all of what you would like to see from future content from charity people, you might want to be a panelist, do just reach out to us and let us know your ideas. We're keen to continue this programme. So whatever the topic, do let us know, and thanks so much. Okay.
Thanks,
We'll
everyone.
wind it up. Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you.
Thank you.